Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, there were two high-profile Democrats in Baton Rouge this week, the President of the United States and the Governor of Louisiana, the latter being the more rare occurrence. We'll look tonight at the new governor and the President rallying support for their administrations, as well as tense opening day politics at the legislature. We'll also examine reorganization at the New Orleans Police Department, who's paying for those monitoring ankle bracelets in Orleans Parish, and the economics of carnival. Standing tall for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Jeremy Alford, publisher, glovepolitics.com. Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. And Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. I'm going to go to Stephanie first to start the discussion about the new administration in Baton Rouge. It was Inauguration Day on Monday.
We have a new Governor Edwards. The old Governor Edwards was there, but we have a new Governor Edwards, and we have an ex-Governor Jindal, so we'll take a little getting used to. Monday was pomp and circumstance day, obviously. It was a beautiful day in Baton Rouge. The governor had a huge smile on his face, was sworn in with his family. He gave not a very long speech and not a speech that broke a lot of news. He really kind of went over some of the themes he's been talking about nonstop, which are the need for unity, the need to fix the budget, and some of the things he talked about in the campaign, social issues. He started talking, Jeremy and I were talking about this earlier, he's really started talking more about poverty in recent weeks, which is kind of interesting. It's something that you really never heard out of Bobby Jindal. And obviously the state has some very bad statistics. And he's been talking about expanding Medicaid, minimum wage, issues that address poverty. But I think he's starting to really kind of put them in the context of tackling this endemic poverty we have in the state. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the first thing, in fact, in the speech, the real first policy issue was children in poverty. And if you go look at the 08 and 12 inauguration speeches from Bobby Jindal, he did not even say the word poverty once. But what struck me was whether you like John Bel Edwards, whether you love John Bel Edwards, it was a historic day. He's the first governor ever to be sworn in on the date of January 11th, 56th governor, 37th Democrat. He's the 5th governor since 1812 to be sworn in alongside a lieutenant governor from a different party, the 4th elected from the House as a former rep, but the first ever to be elected directly from the House. And of course, as we know, he was the first in modern history to not get the hand-picked speaker elected in the House.
Right. And so on this, let's go back to the Inauguration Day. I just kind of want you to describe the feeling of it all, the day, the night, and then we're going to get into the technicalities of what's happening.
Well, again, this is it's normally the day of good feeling. There was some politics that we're going to get to later, obviously. And, there was an event, he went to church in the morning, there was a big ceremony outside the Capitol, there was the formal ball at night, and really the next, John Bell kind of said, we're going to deal with the politics the next day. And he did, because within 24 hours, as he promised during the campaign, he issued an executive order expanding Medicaid, which of course was something he fought for to no avail as a House member, and Bobby Jindal has refused to do. This is under the Affordable Care Act. He signed an executive order putting everything into action. The executive order kind of called out Bobby Jindal, not by name, but basically said, by not doing it sooner, we've left $3 billion on the table. And of course, we're facing this, huge budget deficit. I mean, the numbers really mean something. So,
and so the target implementation date once again remains July 1st. I mean, is this reasonable? Is this really feasible?
They're going to be hiring a bunch of extra people. There's some federal funding to contribute to that too, to kind of get the mechanisms going. We'll see. I mean,
if it works out.
There are some reasons to really rush it, and that is that. The original law basically said that states can get 3 full years of 100% funding, but that was starting from the day the law was enacted, not the day states accepted it. So we're in the last year now. So, the rush is really on to get a year of that 100% funding, unless things change.
Isn't there some talk to maybe extend that to get the full 3 years?
And that's something that the president talked about. We're going to talk about a little later when he came here.
And so we know that the governor wants to extend it. What about the legislature? Are they on board with this?
Extending
the expansion of the Medicaid?
They don't get a vote.
No, they don't. So
They
this
don't.
is not a
This is not
legislative decision.
something,
This is just
again,
going
this
to
is
happen.
executive order.
What you're more likely to see are lawmakers trying to either go after the DHH budget or somehow get into the budget and to derail this. But
Right.
there is one piece that needs to be fixed where hospitals get to
Right.
self-assess a fee that needs to be fixed, and that may have to move through the legislature.
But that is something that the legislature, even when it formally opposed expansion, did pass. And it's something that the hospital industry really does support. And it would basically put the local match on hospitals as opposed to on the states. So it helps with the budget problem, too.
Back to the inauguration real quick. Who of note was not there?
Mike Foster was the only living governor who was not there as former governor. So we had Bobby Jindal, Edwin Edwards. It was just so interesting to see because you remember the days when other governors got inaugurated. I think it was when Kathleen Blanco got inaugurated, and there was Candy Edwards, his ex-wife, on the podium at the spot where he would be. And of course, he was off in prison. He was everywhere this week, he and his new wife, Trina.
And David Vitter wasn't there.
Yes. The member of Congress, Bill Cassidy, was there. The other Republican senator, and Cedric Richmond, and Garrett Graves. Am I
Garrett
correct?
Graves was there. And now I started my day at 6 a.m. at the governor's mansion and rode it with the motorcade, and noticeably absent from anything before the 8 a.m. mass at the cathedral was any political figure. It was John Bell Edwards and just his family. No media. It was a very quiet event. You could tell no matter how much it changed that there's still a family. John Bell Edwards was still at the bottom of the steps, wondering where's his wife, how long is she going to take. The son had smuggled a pack of bacon in his pocket to eat during church.
Oh, that's funny.
But missing from the ball that evening, that's Celtic Studios, was really any of the Republicans that had played a role in some of these leadership votes. So there wasn't that olive branch for that.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the leadership votes. And one of the reasons why I ask you about the legislature signing on with the Medicaid expansion is that immediately what the governor wanted to have happen in terms of speaker did not happen.
Before he was even sworn in, he had a loss.
Jeremy?
Yeah, and that it ended up being probably one of the most significant leadership votes in the Louisiana legislature in modern history. And when I tell you blood was left on that floor of the House of Representatives, it was left. Bridges were burned, friendships were destroyed. It was that there was that much tension around this vote. And we've all been sitting here for a year watching Walt Leger from New Orleans and Cameron Henry from Metairie run this as a two-person race, and it had really come down to that. And there was a lot of plates that were spinning in the last 24 hours before that vote. All the way up until 5 a.m. and even up till 15 minutes before they met on the floor. But Representative Taylor Barra prevailed. This is a term limited guy from New Iberia. He has spent the last 8 years without a chairmanship, without any key piece of legislation, but just truckloads of goodwill. And he's kind of if you want to go back in history, he's a bit of a Joe Salter candidate. Very soft-spoken, very much a gentleman legislator. And I think that there'll be some willingness on his part to work with John Bell Edwards. He's not a far-right legislator. He's actually a former Democrat.
But this was really a surprise. It was pretty stunning.
It was a major shock.
Including the governor. It was surprised.
The governor was calling for meetings with Republican lawmakers all the way up till 5 a.m. before the vote.
And this really is a move towards making the legislature more partisan. It's Cameron Henry, the initial Republican who was in the race, is someone who's considered very much a partisan. He's a protege of Steve Scalise. And, he didn't have the votes among some other Republicans who maybe wanted to have a better relationship with the governor. So they really had to go to this other guy who's something of a blank slate to a lot of people. I mean, I have to tell you, he's never been on my radar.
I think he makes it less partisan and more independent. Independence has always been this Bigfoot term in the legislature. Everybody wants it, no one's ever seen it. Well, now they have it. And look, let's make no mistake.
Although the reason it happened was because of party. I think you have to remember that.
There are some moving pieces, but this was a major political setback for John Bell Edwards. This was a political defeat. However, I think there's some rays of hope. I think that, the House is now independent, so John Bell Edwards can present his executive budget and say, look, y'all, you're independent. You don't need me anymore. Go. And if they fail, he can point the finger. If they accomplish something, he can do like Bobby Jindal, sneak in at the last minute and help take partial credit for it.
Look what I did.
So there's some political cover that could be
Did the
provided.
governor make a mistake by picking a candidate? Should he have just stood on the side and said, "It's your decision.
I think he made a major mistake. Not only did he do it way too early, but I also think that when lawmakers repeatedly came to the governor and said, just pick anyone else, any other Republican candidate that you can live with,
And
we'll make a
with a lot of
compromise.
Republicans.
He dug in. He refused to compromise. And if you talk to folks who worked on the campaign, they'll tell you that John Bud Edwards is the kind of man who refuses to recognize difficulties in any given situation. You know, don't run for governor. You're never going to win. You'll never raise $2 million. These are all things that he ignored, powered forward, and he beat the odds. Well, I think in this case, it snuck up on him and it got the best of
And
him.
one thing that's interesting is, you know, Walt Leger is very well liked, and so it really wasn't personal against him, I think. And one of the interesting things that happened is immediately after the speaker vote that he thought he would win and he lost, the legislature came back and elected him Speaker pro tem, which is the post he's held, the number 2 post, by unanimously. Basically, all the Republicans
pulled
pulled out.
Emotionally too, from all accounts. Did you have a question?
Well, I was just wondering, did anyone catch Governor Edwards' candid reaction behind the scenes when it was a fait accompli?
Well, he was in the back hallway where Huey Long was assassinated, across from Memorial Hall, having a conversation with Senator Bill Cassidy, who, of course, was really put in that position by David Vitter. But a reporter did go up and ask him his reaction to the speaker's race, and he said he would address it in his inauguration speech, which he never did. And the day before, Governor Edwards and his wife Donna stood on the Capitol steps during a walkthrough, and reporters asked him, what do you think about the speaker's race? He goes, I'm not worried now, and I won't be worried tomorrow morning. And I think we all learned that. I'm sure there's just a little bit of concern going into that because there's only supposed to be 2 candidates and it ended up being 4.
4, yeah. So is this a sign of things to come? Just real quickly.
I think it is. I think that in the House they've gotten the taste of independence. They want more. They're already talking about going after capital outlay, which the governor controls, and lawmakers have tried in the past. There's a bill that would give lawmakers more control over these brick and mortar projects that the governor gives out as perks to people who vote with him. Governor John Bel Edwards voted for that bill last year. I think as governor, he may not be so supportive.
And the other thing,
okay, go ahead, real quick, because we need to move
some
on.
very powerful interest groups helped orchestrate this from the outside. Phone calls, robocalls, I think watch them. Social issue groups, business groups.
And we will be over these months to come. All right, Steph, thanks. And Jeremy. Over to Mike now. The New Orleans Police Department is reassigning to get more folks out there patrolling the streets.
Yeah, relatively bold initiative by the NOPD to address problems that we've exposed at WWL on very, very slow response times to 911 calls, as well as this persistent problem really since Landry took office on the dwindling manpower of the NOPD. So what Chief Harrison announced was that 94 officers in non-patrol jobs would be shifted to patrol duties. And that means whenever you add, there's a subtraction somewhere else in the department. This comes at a cost to community policing. So among those officers being transferred are quality of life officers, the community coordinating officers who have meetings with community groups, and then some other jobs that can be filled by civilians in crime lab, impound lot, vehicle repair, and then another part of this plan to gather these 94 extra boots on the ground is to hire back officers who have left the force in good standing as part-time patrol officers 24 hours a week.
And this will start after Mardi Gras, they say.
That's correct. You got to get through Mardi Gras, which is a time when they often pull 12-hour shifts. Everyone's on parade routes. People from these other units are already on the street working parades and supplementing patrols. But once Mardi Gras has come and gone, some of the initial transfers have taken place already. For example, the Public Information Office, which reporters deal with all the time, many of those positions are commissioned police officers. You would think that's a job that could be handled by a civilian, and now it will be, and a couple of civilians have been hired to fill those positions.
And the money is there to hire these new folks?
Yeah, and the money is already there to launch this right away because of the slow pace of hiring, the existing police budget is greater than the number of officers they've been able to hire. So there are basically unfilled vacancies in the police officer ranks to accommodate. What the real cost is going to be the hiring of civilians. This would be new hires to fill, those other jobs where police will be going back to the districts.
Right.
Anytime you hear about a police officer getting in trouble or being under investigation, they say they've been assigned to desk duty. So are they the ones that be doing the desk duty now, while the regular desk duty people out on the street? Or what?
It makes them available, but those are jobs usually in communications. Rather than jobs that interface with the public, officers who are, on desk duty under investigation usually go to either the record room or communications, where they're, sort of out of sight, out of mind until their case gets investigated.
Right. So this reassignment, isn't that something that the OIG recommended almost 2 years ago?
Absolutely, and deployment, has been a big issue, and just on the raw numbers, IG Ed Quattrovo, looked at a few different angles, which is the commissioned officers, in jobs that could be handled by civilians, as well as the department being top-heavy, with more rank ratio than a lot of other cities to the existing patrol officers. This will be able to correct what he recommended on the civilian side, but it's still a little top-heavy on the rank. Some of those initiatives include sergeants getting out from behind the desk, where they would normally be assigned, to actually answering radio calls, which is the dire need. We crunched numbers, going back years, showing that the average response to a 911 call has tripled since 2010, up to 79 minutes on an average call. That's just unacceptable. So and looks like it, by all measures, that's the longest response time to 911 calls anywhere in the country.
So the goal is to shorten that to 7 minutes.
Well, 7 minutes on the emergency calls.
Yeah.
Emergency calls now are 9 to 11 minutes. That's, that's when someone's injured, a perpetrator in the vicinity. But even 11 minutes, it's way too long. And the department realizes, and the public is unsettled by, crimes that may go unsolved, perpetrators who may never get caught as a result of slow response time.
Bottom line, more officers on the street after Mardi Gras coming in Orleans Parish.
Yes.
Okay, speaking Mardi Gras, we're going over to Errol.
Well,
The economics of Carnival you wanted to address.
Well, first of all, I point out that this year is the 10th anniversary of Mardi Gras 2006, and the significance of that is Mardi Gras 2006 was, of course, the first Mardi Gras after Katrina, and that was the Mardi Gras that a lot of people said we shouldn't have. Remember, Ray Nagin was in Atlanta. He was being interviewed by a group of expatriate New Orleans and said, we shouldn't be having Mardi Gras. And Nagin said, I agree with you, we shouldn't, and then not realizing they were TV cameras in the back, and it was all over TV. And then they said, well, maybe we should have it. But it was a great moment because the city, it really helped the city prove itself again. Some people were concerned that if the world saw us partying, that we wouldn't need help, they wouldn't need help anymore. Others said, well, if they don't see us partying, they're going to think we're just dead.
And so many people came back for the first time.
And luckily Mardi Gras that year was February 28th, so it was that much longer that we had to get ready. This year, however, it's February 9th, right? And so it's an early Mardi Gras, and that's having an impact on the economics. Usually the earlier Mardi Gras is, the fewer people you have. There's going to still be a lot of people, but it's 6 weeks after Christmas that you have your Mardi Gras, and so it's harder for people to gear up, and it's also not near a spring break. Spring break tends to be around. Some people think that's good, not having a spring break crowd, and so it should be a respectable crowd in New Orleans, not an overwhelming thing. For the industries that make money off of Mardi Gras, it's a shorter season to make their money. I guess the most prominent is king cakes, but even the huge tuxedo rental business, because the balls have to be kind of condensed, and so some people that may have gone to 2 or 3, those 2 or 3 might all be the same night, and so they have to, choose. And so it could just be tighter, but all signs are it's going to be big, and things like. Endymion, for example, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary, it's celebrating the 50th time it paraded from its first parade. It's just huge, and the crew makes a lot of money, and they put that money back into the parade. So every year there's a new signature float in Endymion. It has 3,100 riders this year. And you think a lot of them, increasingly for the big super crews, more and more of them are coming in from out of town, and so those are the people that come in, they're spending a lot of money, and so it's still something really major in the economic impact of the city.
So a shorter amount of time, so that means we just have to eat a lot of king cakes real fast to make up for it, right?
That is. The good news is that it's a shorter period of time that we're exposed to king cakes, but during that time we have to. And what's happened to king cakes are being creative. I guess we could say it before the show. Someone came in and brought us a duck fat king cake, okay, which I understand was good.
Did you taste it?
Absolutely.
You did taste it?
Yeah. And so king cakes are becoming creative beyond imagination.
Right. Okay, we're going to go back over to Stephanie right now after having her duck fat king cake.
Before I go to the food coma. Yes.
The president visited in Baton Rouge.
Yes. First trip to Baton Rouge for the president, and first meeting with Governor Edwards, who had really kind of distanced himself during the campaign. You know, he was the Democrat who was not like the national Democrats. All smiles this week. And Obama, first of all, he did a town hall meeting at McKinley High School in Baton Rouge, which is a historically black high school, and it was really, I have to tell you, it was pretty moving to see him in that environment and interacting with some of the students and college students who were there, and really, you get the sense of what his presence meant to them. It was really, you forget all these years into the presidency and all the rancor and everything that it's
but
still
he is
such.
The president of the United States.
He's the president, and he's the first black president, and people, they really related to him, and he joked and was very relaxed, didn't wear a tie. He got hard-hitting questions like, will you hug my grandmother? And I want to be just like you and your wife, will you help me? Things. So it was a very, very friendly crowd.
This is the same state where so many nasty things were being said in the campaign only a few weeks ago.
Yep. Felt like a different universe. John Bel Edwards was there, and actually the president came bearing something of a gift, an inaugural gift, which is a policy proposal to change, on the heels of John Bel Edwards signing this executive order to expand Medicaid, basically a financial break to say that this 3 years that was started 2 years ago that Bobby Jindal did not tap into, 3 years of full federal funding, I'm proposing to Congress that we start the clock over. So if Louisiana does this, Louisiana would get 3 full years of 100% funding, which is a very big deal. Problem, Congress.
Problem is Congress. Like, they haven't really been too amenable to Obama, particularly for Obamacare.
Exactly. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Louisiana's Republican representatives and senators do here, because, really this is a very big boon potentially for their constituents, the taxpayers of the state. On the other hand, taking what could be perceived as a pro-Obamacare vote is going to be difficult for them.
Really, billions for Louisiana.
Exactly. How do you vote against that? So. I'm very curious to see what they do.
Yeah, and the White House can provide much more than something that's contingent upon a vote by Congress. Next week, they've set up meetings between Governor Edwards and a few cabinet secretaries, and it's interesting that during the campaign, President Obama was the biggest drag on John Bel Edwards' campaign, and now as governor, he could be one of the biggest.
They're talking
booms.
transportation. Yeah. They're talking about a whole bunch of different things where the federal government can help out, and John Bel Edwards is very willing to talk about those things, unlike Bobby Jindal, who was running against Obama symbolically when he was trying to be president.
How about the irony of those David Vitter ads that had, John Bel Edwards and Obama side by side as if they were physically together, which they never were, but now here, right after the election, there they are.
Even
2 days after being
they didn't even talk before the inauguration, which is very unusual, and I wonder how much of that is John Bel Edwards people saying, keep your distance, but that's all over. That's all in the past now.
Okay, and of course the president thanked everybody in New Orleans, from what
I
understand. Forgetting for a moment where he was.
And then he stopped for po' boys at a Baton Rouge po' boy shop, so that went over well.
Yes. Okay. All right, back over to Mike now to wrap up our discussion today, and that is about ankle bracelets in Orleans, the electronic monitoring devices. We don't have them right now in Orleans Parish.
That's right, and I think this is one of those programs where everybody loses and everyone admits that it's, basically a negative, that this program is now dropped because the sheriff's office, Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, has dropped out of its supervising of these mostly pre-trial detainees on electronic monitoring devices. They've actually been trying to back out of this for more than a year, and the city's encouraged them to, just hang in a little longer. They even cobbled together, police help and city help. But finally, the sheriff's office, which, as we know, has had quite a bit of friction with the Landry administration over so many things, they just said, that's it. this week we're ordering all of these bracelets off of these pretrial detainees. So individually, it was 45 adults and 15 juveniles had to go to court to their respective sections and judges to basically get new bail arrangements. Some of them got locked up, and the most actually got some new bail arrangement that allowed them to remain off without ankle bracelets. And the reason why this is, deflating really for everybody involved is that this is best practices around the country. It helps decrease your incarceration rate. It's less expensive, and it has an extremely high rate of success. So, of course, I remember one of the officials telling me, well, it's such a great program everywhere else. Of course, New Orleans can't get it right. Now, what is happening is the city has put out a request for proposals for some private operator to submit bids to run the program. That's actually going all the way full circle back to where it was years ago with a program called TSAP that ran into just tremendous problems, poor monitoring, and that led to it transferred to the sheriff's office, which is now dropping out. So we'll see. It's a very specialty type of service, and we'll see if at least one private operator in New Orleans has gone on record saying they're going to submit a bid. We may not get too many others beyond that.
So the sheriff's office said that they weren't getting money from the city to operate.
There were some points of contention. One, they said they didn't have the personnel, that it took 24-hour personnel to monitor. It's really dots on a screen where these people are, and if they, on house arrest or in curfew like they're supposed to be. And the other was they said they weren't getting paid on a timely basis by the city. But the city responded that the sheriff's office refused to sign a cooperative endeavor agreement allowing the payment. So once again, it seems so petty, easily resolved. The two sides could never get it together.
But the idea is to get this going again, just through probably
that is the city's wishes,
vendor.
Especially when the city and Mayor Landry are so committed to what they say is right-sizing Orleans Parish Prison, reducing the incarceration rate, which we all know in Louisiana is the highest in the civilized world.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Time to look ahead. Errol.
Well, just about anywhere you go in that civilized world, if you go to an airport, there's always construction at airports. Well, there's about to be a lot of construction at our airport. They've had the groundbreaking this week. This is going to be really big. This is going to almost pick up the airport and move it to another side of the property. But the work is starting. There's going to be a lot of construction, which we're all used to seeing. And it's the projected due date or finishing date is October 1st, 2018.
All right, Errol. Jeremy.
Over the next few days, I will leave for Washington Mardi Gras, which is slated for next week. The captain this year is David Vitter, so some of the internal palace intrigue is who will be the next captain of D.C. Mardi Gras. It could be one of the next upcoming major players on the Hill from Louisiana.
All right, Jeremy, thank you. Mike.
Yeah, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind, so I'll bring up our Pelicans. The season has not gone as expected, and we have now started what is the NBA's trading period from now for a whole month, and Pelicans obviously need a lot of help. They have some pieces to trade, so look for some shakeup with that team.
Okay, Steph.
Well, we're in the entertainment front, I guess. Jazz Fest schedule comes out Tuesday.
Looking forward to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.